idea of the Northeast is like in fall is beautiful.
Well, let's see now. Where are we? And welcome everybody to the 29th Annual Woods Hole Film Festival virtual version. We are here this morning with Johanna Falzon, Sarah Hallowell, and Nicholas Batchelder because they are the finalists in the screenwriting competition. Johanna Falzon and Sarah Hallowell in the dramatic shorts category, and Nicholas Batchelder. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Could you tell
It's
us?
Batchelder.
Batchelder,
Yeah.
Nicholas Batchelder in the feature dramatic category. I'm going to start with Johanna, Sarah, and then Nicholas to let us know a little bit about their screenplays for people in the audience who have not had the pleasure of reading these amazing screenplays. Could you tell us a little bit about your screenplay, Johanna?
Yeah, it's called Purple Line Express. It's a coming of age screenplay for like in your mid early 20s kind of area, and it's about a girl who she moves to Chicago and it's her first time taking the L, and she has no idea what she's doing, and she ends up meeting this older man that kind of teaches her how to navigate the L and the events that happen after that. So they end up being on the same train the same time every day. And it's about kind of her relationship with the people in the city and this relationship that she has with the older man. And he's kind of like a father figure to her. So it just kind of develops through their experiences on the L. So
Wonderful. Thank you, Johanna. And Sarah, can you tell us a little bit about your project?
Yes, Johanna, you're gonna laugh. Mine's actually about a younger girl. She's 10, living in Hollywood in the 70s, and she's friends with this elderly neighbor, a man, and how her relationship with fate changes through this relationship with this man. And it's a true story. And it's something that happened to me. I dramatized it. I don't know whether I should give spoiler alert, but it's a little girl who's obsessed with the Marx Brothers. And she's sort of a little bit of an outsider because it's kind of a weird thing for a 10-year-old. I've actually had people say to me, that's not possible that a little girl would be interested in something like the Marx Brothers, but it's true. And the old man that she becomes friends with, who lives down the street in Hollywood, ends up passing away. And she finds out on television at the very end of the short that Julius was actually Groucho and that she knew him the whole time. And there's also a contest that she's trying to win and she doesn't win it. But anyway, it's I wouldn't say it's coming of age. It's just sort of a magical Hollywood sort of story.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Nicholas, please tell us about your project.
Well, Land of Light is it's based on a true story of the first woman in U.S. history to have a statue made in honor of a woman. It takes place in the 1690s, so colonial New England, in Haverhill, Massachusetts. And it's kind of an intertwining story between her story and her sister's story. So it's a little complicated and it's a little twisty, but I'm just gonna read the log line because it'll be a lot easier. So if I can find it. Okay. It follows intertwining tales of two colonial New England sisters, Elizabeth, who must hide her illegitimate pregnancy from the watchful eyes of her strict Puritan town, and Hannah, who must find a way to escape her captors, a band of Abenaki bounty hunters that intend to sell her to the French as a slave.
All right. So all three wonderful screenplays. And I want to ask something about the characters, how you crafted these characters, how you chose them, and why. So let's start again with Johanna.
So, when I created the characters, it was based off of what happened to me last year in Chicago. And so the main character Josie is based off of me as this young girl, and I was like, my mom had nicknamed me Josie as a kid because I the movie Never Been Kissed. My mom always thought, that was one of my favorite movies, and then I loved Josie and the Pussycats. So I was like, okay, let's really make this like, like it's inspired by me, and my family's from Chicago originally. So I was like, this all like let's tie it in together with all these Chicago themes. And then the man from Wilmette that she meets on the train, I never got the man's name. I just knew he was from Wilmette because that's where I got on, and which is the beginning of Purple Line. So, and then the other character, Robbie, who comes in at the end, he's named after Robbie Hart, and his character is kind of formed on that lightheartedness. He's actually someone who like doesn't exist in real life, so I had to pull parts of like a positive influence on a male character. So that's kind of how they were developed through like the real people, and then through the idea of like what a good person would be. And then there's a character who's actually never seen, which is Zach. He's mentioned because he's the original love interest of Josie, but he is actually developed through multiple bad experiences I've had. And
Okay.
so there's all elements of truth,
Yeah.
but different guys
Yeah.
throughout my life. So I was like, let's make the ultimate terrible guy. And I was like, I'll put all these elements into his character. And then the best part is you never meet him because I decided he wasn't worth meeting. Like, and then I have one character who's like just kind of a stand-in who is an Asian man. And he's a real guy who was on the train. And he literally like looked at me like I was crazy when I got on that train last year. I was like, I'm saying out loud, I'm like, oh my God, this is the Purple Line Express. I'm not supposed to be on an express train. And he hears me say this out loud and he looks at me like, and I thought it was so funny. I was like, I need to have him like just be there because he just the element of his reaction to me
Right.
was so funny. And he doesn't come in until later when she actually freaks out about this revelation that the guy she was kind of with has kids and is married. But I thought that was a perfect spot to put him in because it was more of a humiliating moment.
Right. Right. So they're very much inspired on real circumstances and real
Yeah.
people, but you've extrapolated because, as you said, you didn't really know the man from Wilmette.
No,
That's
no.
okay.
I just knew that he was the nicest person that I ever kind of met on a train, and I had no idea he would be so helpful and
Right.
open. Like usually you're pretty guarded when you're on like the train lines,
Yeah.
but I was like he literally got me back on the train. He's like, "No, you need to get back on the train." And I
Wow.
sat next to him, and then the whole time he just talked to me, and he was really quirky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yes. As we see.
so I just thought it would interesting to develop, what would this be like if it kept going?
Well, that would be very interesting if somehow through the festival circuit you get to see this stranger who inspired your film.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Johanna. Sarah, you've kind of told me something a little bit about what I was curious about. So, was your screenplay based on or semi autobiographical?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so this really did happen to you. And for the viewers out there who have not had the pleasure of reading the screenplay, as you mentioned, this is your early meetings and friendship with Julius, who we all know as Groucho Marx.
Yeah.
At the time, did you have an idea that this was in fact who he was?
No, and it's what's peculiar and interesting about little kids, and I'm a mother, so I have some experience, not just with myself. Um, they look at an older person and they only see the old person, like, and he was very, very old. It was right before he died, so he was in his late 80s. He was very frail, and he was basically the man who lived down the street. He had a girlfriend who's one of the characters in this thing, um, who was so terrifying, and she sort of had red flaming hair, and it's she's a great character because she's a terrible person, and she was sort of in charge of Groucho at the end of his life, and his family was very worried about him being with her, and it was her house down the street, and it was a very humble neighborhood. It was in West Hollywood, and it's not like big glamorous houses, and he would come out and sit on the stoop
Right.
every day basically. So,
Right.
and I had a little dog, and I would walk my dog down the street, and he'd say things like, you're walking that cat again, and we just chit chat. And finally there was one day where my mother was walking with me for some reason, and we got home, and she said, do you know who that is? And I said, no. And she said, that's Groucho Marx, Sarah. That's Groucho Marx. And I was like, what? And then he died.
Wow.
And so this was sort of, I dramatized it, and it's part of actually uh, a television pilot called Carthay Circle. And there are two other little girls in it that I was friends with. One who was a child actress with this insane mother, and then another girl who lived down the street, also, who was sort of my closest friend at the time, who's also in Hello, I Must Be Going.
Wow. So these are all inspired by real people, real.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the trick was also getting the language right, because you're writing for a 10-year-olds, and you're writing for a late 80s, and I was very close with my grandparents, so I wrote Groucho sort of as my grandfather, because I didn't know Groucho as well as I knew my grandfather, obviously. So I took a lot of his humor, and even things that he used to literally say that were really, really funny, and inserted them sort of into the character. So he's sort of an amalgam of my grandpa and Groucho for real.
Wow. Fascinating. Thank you, Sarah. And Nicholas, so you've also answered a little bit of it, but I'd like for you to go in deeper, that this character is based on a real historical person, but there are so many other characters as well. So I'd like to know something about how you came to choose this as your subject, and how you wrote such a comprehensive historical drama.
Well, a lot of research first. But first it came from, I'm actually a descendant of the protagonist. I'm Hannah's great grandson. And I maybe heard this story the first time when I was 8 or 9 years old by my grandmother. And so I think a lot of what I couldn't dig up historically about these characters, I kind of just infused that side of my family, like just basically into these characters a lot. But yeah, I don't think I've made up any of the characters that are in it, except for maybe some small supporting role. A lot of it I was able to dig up from old historical documents. Cotton Mather, who is a really horrific person in our history, wrote a lot about all of these characters. So you have something to go off of, even though it's through his lens. Right. But yeah, that was the start of it, was just falling in love with the story, knowing the story just because I'd been told to me at such a young age. And then just diving into the history and filling in the gaps creatively when it was necessary.
So it is, it's historical, but there are some elements of fiction involved as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we kind of know there's a lot of short stories based on Hannah and on her sister, but obviously not in detail. It's just kind of like the bullet points of their stories were kind of out there to find. But yeah, the human aspect of it, I that had to be all fiction, and that was largely inspired by that side of my family where I'm a descendant through from Hannah.
Fascinating. So I don't think I had realized that you were actually related
Yeah,
to the protagonist. That's amazing. So I'd like to shift over to some of the craft of writing and putting together these screenplays. There are some thought that for some writers, they start out with, whether it's a storyboard or an outline, some kind of a template or structure, and others may start with strong characters or a place and go from there and write basically episodically, like kind of free form. I'd like to know a little bit about your process, how you approached it. Let's start with Nicholas, since we're
sure.
talking about historical drama there.
Well, because I had to fill in so many gaps, I kind of just had a giant board that had, I basically did index cards of like what I knew, and could actually see the gaps in between. You could kind of write my way through it. But structurally, my story is also kind of interesting in that it's following two main stories and the spine that's kind of like the most recent film I could think that has a spine the same way as Social Network, where the litigation between Mark Zuckerberg and his lawyers and the people who are suing him kind of serves as the spine, and then we flash back from that. I do a similar thing here, but I flash back to two different stories that take place on two different timelines. So plotting it out on a big board and having a different colored index card for this part of Elizabeth's story than this part of Hannah's story, and then the spine, and going back and forth between all of those. And that also let me see kind of the whole thing at once, so I could find a way to have the stories play off of each other, just tonally, thematically. What happens to one sister in a different way happens also to the other sister. So kind of finding that sequence that worked correctly. And that kind of worked till like the midpoint of the film. I mean, I had like a lot of my third act in there too, but at that point I kind of just took off with writing, and I kind of didn't want to know a lot of things about my third act until I was living in it, and just kind of being, just kind of almost being like an observer, just like watching what happened. So and then obviously after that, revise and rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. So the first draft was awful.
As is often the case
Yeah.
with screenplays. So it basically started out highly structured, and then at some point you just kind of let go and just let that structure drive the rest of the
Yeah.
narrative.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then rewrites. And what was the timeline there from first inception when you started putting together this project to
Oh my
um,
God.
completed
A,
it?
a long time, because I mean, it wasn't the only thing I was doing. So it was, between jobs and when I had free time. So probably a couple of years from first, thinking about it and maybe starting to research to having a pretty solid draft.
Okay. So 2 years is
Yeah,
around.
yeah, it's probably
When
about
you
right.
say a long time, I mean, I just interviewed other people who said, and this took, many, many years. So a long time is very, context dependent.
Yeah, true, very true.
Good to know. Good to know. And Sarah, obviously this you said was autobiographical, and this happened when you were a little girl. But when was the point at which you decided that you wanted to write this, and how did you go about it?
Um, I think I just wanted to write about the time period. It's funny because I was a fan of Gilmore Girls as well, Joanna. And I loved and related to the relationship between mother-daughter. My mother and I are very, very different that way. We're more the sort of sensitive types rather than the funny types, but we were very, very close. I'm an only child, and so our relationship was very strong. And also just the idea of winning and contests, and sort of curious about that whole process. I've never really submitted my screenplays for anything before this year because of COVID. I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna send a few things out, one short, one feature. Um, because I guess I was always afraid I'm never going to win anything. And the little girl in my story also feels like it was originally called The Winner because although she doesn't win the contest and go to MGM with Groucho Marx, she finds out when the television announces that he's died that she knew him all along. So I think there's a lot of reasons why I wrote it, and I write. I actually fall into Nicholas's wheelhouse, and I like writing a lot of period pieces, and I guess this is a period piece too, in a sense, because it's the 70s. But I love delving into periods of time.
So was this a project that you had started during this whole pandemic situation, or had you started it a while back? So
No, I started it a while back, but I decided originally it was going to be a feature, and then a friend of mine was like, "This feels more like TV," and then I thought, well, I'm a director too, so I thought, well, if I want to make part of this, and I'm not a showrunner and I can't put together, maybe I'll just start with a building block, and what's the strongest line in this longer screenplay, and this line to me was the more emotional and most connected, probably because it's about myself, but but so that's why I chose it, and so it took a while to sort of pull it out and then create a short structure, because short, as Johanna knows, a short structure is really different than screenplay, than full length, and you have to really get to it.
yes. So may I just bore in just a little bit deeper and find out exactly how long ago did you start this screenplay?
8 years ago.
Okay. And it's now that you've decided to bring it forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a lot of other things. I think my light's getting. I have a lot of other things that I'm writing and have written and gotten involved with and directed. So I'm sort of I went down millions of other rabbit holes, but there's this is so close to my heart. It's
Yeah.
so personal, and I love it, and I really want to make it. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Johanna, tell us a little bit then about when I don't even know the timeline of this, when you had that Chicago train ride, and just like how did that play out? What was the process for you?
So it was about a year ago, almost exactly, because I was going to Windy City Film Festival for a feature screenplay that I wrote. And so I was like, okay, I have to be a big girl and ride the L by myself. Nobody's going to be helping me. And so that experience is like what I got the idea, and I was like, this would be a cool short film. And I met another filmmaker in Chicago, and I just told him about the idea, and he had rented the CTA for his short film that was at that festival, and told me what it cost and how to do it. And I was like, this is doable. Like it's about $800 for 3 hours and at like 3 in the morning or something like that. And you get
What's
your
the
own
CTA?
driver.
Could you tell us the CTA?
The
What is that?
CTA is the Chicago Transit Authority. They
Oh,
run,
okay.
yeah, they run the L.
Okay, got
So, so it's kind of funny in Chicago because they call the other word for the L is the train.
it.
And I always get confused because I think when someone says the train, they mean the choo-choo train because
Right,
they also have, but they call that the metro.
right.
You have to like, I always say, okay, I'm going on the L or I'm going on the metro or I never say train because everybody always gets confused. So,
Okay.
but so anyway, I had a lot going on with teaching and just things, and I had to like really, I was like, I really want to write this, and I brainstormed what was going to happen after the real encounter, and had to think, okay, what are the going to be the problems in this screenplay? How is it going to be resolved? How are they going to develop their relationship? What kind of conversations are they going to have? So I took the time that I couldn't dedicate to writing. I just took to brainstorming. And I
Yes.
think about October was when I actually like sat down and started writing it. And I had my friend that I met in Chicago, he read over it and then gave me his point of view on like what should I cut out, what do I need to bring in. And then I had another friend read it through and we went over the, like, I guess you could say the romantic relationship, I guess, between
Yes.
Robbie and Josie. It's not really romantic because we, like when I talked about it with my friend, we looked at this perspective of they shouldn't be in a relationship. It shouldn't be rushed. It should just be friendly and make it seem like something could happen in the future. But we don't want to tie down the characters. And but we wanted to have like a ending that was good enough for the audience to say, okay, we feel complete.
Right.
Because I don't like cliffhangers personally,
Right.
so I try to stay true to like having a ending that is satisfactory. But then around, I would say New Year's is when I re-edited it again with my mom's input,
Okay.
and she comes in and she helps me with a lot of final edits. Like my mom's really good, like she's helping me with another edit of this other screenplay, and she'll come in with a perspective of, like, she's lived her entire life in Chicago. She rode the train, the L, everything, and she is also, in terms of like political, because there is a political aspect in this screenplay, and she's like, well, you don't want to negate certain audiences. So she gave me pointers on, okay, how to approach it? What should they say that's not going to deter people who may not, agree with my standpoint of what I'm writing about. So um we had that discussion and then came up with the final script was around, I guess, like the end of January. And so
Okay.
that's just kind of took a
Hmm.
couple months, which for a short screenplay that was pretty quick.
Yeah.
Because like I've had a feature that I had started in 2017 and I'm rewriting it. I'm not like rewriting the whole thing,
Right.
but I'm doing more edits now to it, and it's 2020, so I think it's like to have another screenplay that really didn't go through that much of a process is pretty nice. Not to have to
Absolutely.
rewrite that many times.
Had you started with the structure, with the outline or a storyboard? And
No. I'm like I always say I'm like the worst person when it comes to outlines, because everybody's like, you should have an outline and it'll help you like go along with the story. And I just have such a rush of ideas that I just kind of keep writing until I stop. And then it's only if I write a feature where I kind of pace myself.
right.
Short screenplays, I kind of like knock it out.
Hmm.
But a feature, I usually take my time and I'll either do a short story format for that and then turn it into a feature. But for short story, I just kind of roll with whatever the idea is, and then I come back to it and I see like what doesn't work, or does this connect? Because sometimes when I just kind of write in a flow, it some things don't always connect, and I have to go back and see, okay, where did I miss making sure this transitioned
Right.
correctly. Um, but it just kind of it comes out.
Wonderful, wonderful. No, I hear your process in that. It sounds like it really just kind of flowed. A lot of it informed by memory and
Yeah.
past relationships and things like that. I want to move over to now where it goes from here. Like, what are the next steps for all of you in this process? And I'll start with Sarah on this. It sounds like you had a pretty clear idea about how this could go. You talked about um, possibility of for TV, well, first for film, then for TV, then now it's a short. Tell me more about where you see this going and what would you like to see happen with this project?
I think I want to make it myself. I want to shoot it myself. Unfortunately, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, so and I considered also maybe being able to go shoot B-roll because I live in Hollywood and Los Angeles, and so I could drive around and maybe capture things and maybe get a voiceover of a little girl. I have a friend who has a little girl the age of Tess, and maybe we could make sort of a teaser. That's sort of where I am right now. I mean, ultimately, I have some people that have said, this is an intriguing little short because also it can turn into a feature or a series. So it would sort of start with the building block and then see what response would be to that. And then from there, perhaps if I ever get so lucky, um, open it up.
Do you have representation?
I have a lit manager that I actually just met a week ago. So we'll see what happens with her.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Nicholas, let me ask you, where do you see this going? How would you like to see it play out?
Well, I'm also a director, so I want to make it and I want to direct it. And it kind of also, I also write and for friends or other people to direct, but this is such a personal story. I don't, this is like my baby. I don't think I could let it go. So, so yeah, I want to direct this. Of course, the problem is it's a period film that takes place in the 17th century. So, you know, it's going to be not a small budget.
Right.
So, and I don't have a lit agent yet. So, yeah, that's where I'm at with it.
So you have experience though directing feature
I haven't
length.
directed a feature yet, but more shorts and commercials and things of the shorter scale.
Okay. So and is it fair to assume that you're submitting these to several film festival screenwriting competitions and all
Yeah.
that? Wonderful. Okay. And Johanna, where do you see this going?
Um, I would like to film it and direct it and act in it just because it's based off of me and I figure I know the character the best. Because I've gotten more into acting now, so I feel comfortable doing that. But um I don't know what a timeline would be. I originally wanted to start before all the pandemic happened. My goal was to actually use this year to raise money for
Yeah.
it to be made and then
Mhm.
make it probably in like 2021. But now that's pushed back because I have friends who are in crew and I personally don't feel comfortable putting all of us in that situation of trying to film right now. So it would probably I think like now I could still focus on fundraising for it, and seeing what could happen there and film festivals and screenwriting contests for getting it out there to seeing like who's interested in the content,
Yes.
just to kind of put it out there because I feel like the pandemic has given us kind of like a time to really plan more. I think we always move really fast and normal time, and now we actually can really think about the projects we actually want to make and
Yes.
really think, okay, who do I want to approach for this project?
Right.
And who could really actually realistically fund it or grant writing, things like that. So, that's kind of like where my current focus is like this planning stage so that when it is much safer and even in terms of insurance because right now I know some insurance agents for filming in Chicago and like it's either very expensive right now
Right.
or you like for COVID there's nobody covering it if
Right.
someone got sick. So that's a big deal. And I don't want to risk. So that's the other thing with the risk. I wouldn't want to risk a crew or actors
Right.
with that risk. So it's just more of a planning thing. But I do really want to do like make it because I feel like it's so Chicago and because I grew up with Chicago and grew up with Chicago films, and I know how that industry is so like I don't it's like a family.
Right.
It's very like people are so welcoming and close knit, and I want to bring that back, like
Nice.
for people to see, um, because it I just feel like that I just remember growing up seeing that, and I want to like revitalize Chicago in a way with a short film. Not that it will, but I think that Chicago has so much to offer for filming, and we saw that a lot in the past, so it would be great to bring it back.
Wonderful. Well, I have more questions, but I wanted to make sure that our viewers know that if they have questions for any of our screenwriters, please place it in the chat box, and I will be glad to pose that to our screenwriters here. But Johanna, you bring up something that I also wanted to ask all of you as writers. As we all know, the industry has been highly impacted by this ongoing pandemic and the social distancing measures that inhibit a lot of productions at this point. And I wanted to know, as writers, how you are adjusting to this, whether it's in the form of, as Johanna says, planning, or are you transitioning to other forms of writing that may, move your projects forward? What are you doing as a result, or what do you see yourself doing as a result of these new social distancing measures? Go ahead, Johanna.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
um, for me, right now, I'm still writing screenplays, and I'm entering fellowships because right now that's like I think that's a great way of like still being active in the community. Not saying that, we're all going to get a fellowship, but it's a possibility. I also been writing little shorts that I film at home,
Okay.
and then I act in. So it's like been great to not just work on writing. It's been great as an actor to practice and not feel pressure
Yeah.
from other directors or other, like I do auditions and that's a whole other thing, but with my own work I can really feel free to work on comedy and sketch comedy and drama, and really pushing boundaries that maybe before I might have been afraid to do. Or because even right now, a lot of the like acting classes are online. So it's like a different way of doing it, because like this is how we would be doing the acting class if we were
Right.
doing it online. So it's kind of a little bit like I guess you're just practicing this way. It's I don't know, it's just different. But when I actually get out and film something on my own and then have people come back and like see it and critique it, um, it gives a different way of looking at what your craft is, and I feel has been really helpful. And also as felt like a filmmaker, giving you that opportunity to use your own devices. So like you have to set up your own lighting, you have to set up your shots, do all of that cinematography yourself, and edit everything on the computer yourself, find the sound and all that. So it's a good learning experience to make yourself more well-rounded. So
Yeah.
it's not just practicing being a writer, you're also getting familiar with equipment, and as an actor, if you have to put yourself out there and you don't have anybody else to act for you. So that's kind of how I've been utilizing it other than just writing,
Yeah.
which has been fun. And I encourage everybody to do it, even if it's just like I've been doing their like 2 minutes like films, or sometimes they're 15-minute like comedies or something. So, you have the freedom now and the time to dedicate to being really creative, versus being caught up in this really fast-paced business.
Wonderful. Please do write in the chat box where we might be able to see some of those
Yes,
shorts. We'd love to see
yes,
some more
I'll
of
put
your
them
work. Thank you, Johanna.
in.
I'll pose the same question now to Sarah. How do you see your work as a writer or as a director changing in light of the social distancing measures of COVID imposed?
I'm getting on the Johanna train in the sense of uh, this has been a gift creatively because everything ground to a halt. So I think that anybody who's a creator, if able, can write, direct, act, whatever you want to do. Because I paint also, so I'm painting a wall outside my house and making a mural. And I started some things that I sort of had put aside, just ideas that I really was attracted to, but just sort of didn't have time to start. And a friend of mine and I sat down, and we'd never written together before. I'd worked with her as an actress and I was the director. She's incredibly talented, and we wrote a pilot and created a world, and we're on our second draft, and we're doing a reading today. And it's just, I think that this has given me the opportunity to dream again and to take walks and think about which, because I mean, just like you guys, I'm sure I have these baskets behind my desk that have project, and some are in various stages. But there's one in particular that I really am feeling that urge that like it wants to come out sort of. And I'm able now to start that. And I'm doing the research on it right now. And
is it a film project?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So you're seeing an efflorescence of artistic projects in several types of genres, but you're also working on other screenplays as well,
yeah.
Right? Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Nicholas, let us know where, what is happening with you as a result of this era, I should say.
Well, as a writer, it's great. Having a ton of time. The past 4 months, there are 2 shorts that I had started and I finished. I beated out a historical miniseries that I've like had in the back of my mind forever, which was a lot of research because with anything that's historical, there's that.
What time frame are we talking?
Actually, same. It's actually is about one of the characters that's in in my feature Land of Light, and it was just like side character that I just kind of fell in love with, and that just took me off in a whole other direction. So I beat it out. Basically, it'd be like a 8-part, hour-long each episode miniseries, so 8 hours.
Which character?
And then 2 other features that kind of were on the back burner. I've been beating those out and starting the writing process of those 2. And then as a filmmaker, I took there's a couple different COVID compliance officer training courses that you can take to make sure that when you are on set that everybody is being safe. And so I shot one of the 2 shorts that I'd written early on in the start of COVID, like March, early April. We actually filmed that 2 weeks ago. Lucky for me, my wife is a cinematographer, so the 2 of us were basically like almost the entire crew, and we went out and shot with a couple actors, and it was kind of our first like dipping our toes back into being in production after all of the shutdown and doing it safely. And since we obviously did all the precautions on set and took COVID tests before and then afterwards, and then getting the negatives afterwards, it was like kind of an interesting experience getting a negative on the test and be like, okay, we did that right. We did everything really okay, cool, we did that. And it was safe and everybody's okay. But it was kind of confirming that as long as you're taking the precautions, you can go out there and film, depending on where you are, obviously. And
where were you filming?
Well, we filmed a lot of the wides were all over the place. We went up to Lone Pine, which is 4 hours north of Los Angeles. And then we went up to Big Sur, which is, just south of San Francisco. And we filmed out near Victorville, which is, if you just go from LA just straight out towards the desert, kind of like on your way to Vegas, as well as a lake up kind of not near Big Bear Lake, but up in that region of the mountains. So and in a studio in the valley. So we kind of shot everywhere.
Fantastic. Well, we are surprisingly at time. I can't believe it's all gone so quickly, but I'm really excited for all three of you. Congratulations on being finalists. I look forward to the announcements of the winners of the excuse me, the screenwriting competition. And I certainly hope that I will have the pleasure to meet all of you in 3D at some point, perhaps in Woods Hole or anywhere in the festival circuit. Thank you all so much.
Thank
And
you, Hortense. Really,
Thank you.
this is
Thank
fun.
you.
my pleasure. You guys are amazing writers. Power to you folks. And take